you were about to go on to freedom.
Yes, right. Yes. Well, I think freedom has become a much diminished concept too, where it's the idea of all human liberties being subsumed by greater freedom of consumer choice is one of the great kind of conjuring tricks of the century. I mean, and even on its own level, consumer choice is a very interesting idea that the price that we pay for enhanced consumer choice, and I think there are now something like 12,000 items on display in any average medium-sized supermarket, the price that we pay for that is a diminishing of biodiversity in the world. That is to say that all the proliferation of goods and services that appear in the supermarket are paid for by a decreasing genetic base of the crops upon which people depend for their sustenance in the world, by an incredible loss of diversity both in species and in crops and in means of provisioning our needs. So we're living in a world of illusion. Again, it's partly from the idea that we can transcend the natural world, that we can live independently of its laws, and that the laws of political economy are somehow more basic, more ultimate, more natural than nature itself. This seems to me to be the greatest charge to be made against the capitalist system, is the act of hubris that it makes, whereby it tries to pretend that what is after all only one system among others is somehow essential, the most profound, and somehow deeply rooted in an almost mystical notion of nature. I think, you see, we live in a world of illusions, and it's not even true to say that Western society is even materialist. It'd be truer to say that we are mystics. Why is that? Because if we were truly materialistic, we would have a much profounder respect for the material world, for the natural world, which furnishes us with most of what we need ultimately. We would also have a far greater respect for the material artifacts of our own manufacture. But we have a profound contempt for both, because we make things to be destroyed and thrown away as possible, and we use up the earth at an accelerating pace. So that's not materialism. That's a bizarre kind of mysticism, because we expect the resources that we are abusing and exhausting with such speed mysteriously to replenish themselves. So it's a profound act of faith. You could say that indigenous peoples and tribal peoples are much more materialistic than the West, because they have a great reverence for the trees and the forests and the resources upon which they depend. The fact is, they're also deeply spiritual cultures as well. Out of that respect for their material resources, they develop their kind of animistic religion, and that's how they manage to keep sustainable economics going over millennia. So in a way, the West is not materialist, and the spiritual cultures of the indigenous and tribal peoples are not spiritual, they're materialist. I mean, in a way, we're living through great paradoxes, and all of this is filtered through the monstrous belief that we can both conquer and live independently of the natural world, and that the capitalist system has uniquely found some deep source of, within human nature, of unlocking those processes in the universe for creating wealth, and ultimately for delivering us from the consequences of our actions. What a strange religious project we're engaged upon. But until we can actually name it and begin to recognise it for what it is, we should be depowered in trying to resist and fight it and find alternatives to it.
Okay, that's great. Just one or two other questions. I'm just thinking in terms of other points other interviewees have made, which you might want to sort of put an alternative point of view across. One is, what would you say to the view that these indigenous peoples and so on actually have terrible lives in terms of short life expectancy, famine, disease, and other, basically having a desperate struggle with nature. And when you do have a market, it does improve people's lives in these respects.
Okay, it's a very good question. I mean, I think, first of all, I mean, is it worse for people to live and die within their belief system, however cruel? And sometimes, of course, they were. I mean, sometimes these societies were very cruel.
Oh, sorry, actually, do you mind just restating?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I mean, it's often said that the market actually releases people from age-old servitude to superstition and impoverishment and disease. But it's also true that the coming of the colonialism, the colonizing market system, also profoundly take something away from people, which is their belief. If you look at, say, the fate of the Aboriginals in Australia, or the Indians, the indigenous peoples of North America, no one would say that their life since the advent of the white culture has been enhanced. Quite the reverse. Their life expectancy has been diminished. They've been exposed to new diseases. The same thing, of course, is going on in the Amazon today. They're being exposed to all kinds of new forms of violence. Now, when those cultures were intact, they were open to the vagaries of natural disaster, even of years of famine and flood. But of course, those cultures were not stupid. They, within their own terms, made such accommodations as they could with the limitations of nature. They used to husband the resources of one year for the next. So they were far less prone to famines and to diseases than we might like to think. One of the great problems was it was the contamination of colonial culture that dealt them their death blow. So what we see as the indigenous cultures is actually something that we've come to, we the contaminants have recorded and judged. It is also true that those indigenous cultures had fantastic healing systems, and there are people now called ethnobiologists in the pay of the transnationals who are now going to synthesize the chemicals in the indigenous healing plants of so many of these cultures and patent them for Western medicines. So in fact, what we're looking at when we talk about what Marx called the idiocy of rural life, I think he vastly overestimated the rationality and civilization of urban life. We're looking at cultures that had already been irretrievably broken and affected by the conquerors.
Okay, that's great. Another point, again, we should just think about what somebody said. Would the green policies or whatever lead to a fall in the standard of living of people? Okay. And if it would, in your opinion, or say a fall in consumption or whatever, how would you get people to agree to that? And of course, if they didn't want the green proposals, would you force them to adopt these?
They're very good questions. Things? Yeah. Well, I mean, I think if you say would green policies involve a fall in the standard of living, I think first we have to unpack the notion of a standard of living. How many of the goods and services which we currently consume in the West are consolations, compensations, indulgences, self-administered treats for all kinds of other absences in our lives? And I think that's what we kind of need to unpack before we talk about... We're living in a state of profound dependency upon the goods and services that are provided for us. So nothing could be more horrific to us than a cutting off of the supply of them. I think this goes back to the role and the nature of money in our society, that in fact money, far from being a provider of independence to people, is the supreme generator of dependency. Because once you depend upon a a high income, it becomes increasingly inconceivable that you could do and make things for yourself. You become deeply dependent upon that money being maintained. So we're talking about people who are essentially living in an addictive society. And to talk in terms of loss or of giving up or of renouncing is a profound mistake. I think what we can do, we can look at some of the negative consequences of our way of living, not our standard of living, but our way of living, and saying, look, when you look at, say, the cost to human beings of the diseases of excess, of the strange carcinogens and toxins and poison, the invisible radiations that pollute and contaminate our contemporary life, as well as the socially engendered addictions and crime and violence and fear on the streets and attacks on human beings and breakdown of family. When you look at all those things, you say, look, these are part of the hidden costs that we pay for our dependency upon buying next year's model of car, for an extra holiday, for whatever it may be that we come to depend upon for our sustenance. And we think maybe we should talk in terms of being liberated from some of the scourges that are the unfailing attendants of market economy success, rather than talk about renouncing what you've got. We need to make a fairer balance of the costs and the benefits of the existing paradigm. And I don't think we have anything like an adequate balance sheet of the price we pay in human and environmental and spiritual terms, really, to make a judgment. I think we need to escape from this extremely narrow accounting system. So when you say, will people accept? Well, of course people won't accept, but that's because we live in a society where the debate has been so diminished and debased that we only see a kind of pitiful shadow of the true significance to our lives of what is actually happening to us and being done to us, in which we become kind of passive responders rather than actors in our own destiny, our own lives.
Okay, great. If you just want to ask another couple of questions. Sorry to keep going on like this. Okay, one is, what would you say to the view that resources are in fact unlimited, in the sense of, resources out of space and colonising other planets, space stations and so on?
Yeah.
That's the next question.
Oh yeah, is that a question?
Yeah,
are you serious? Okay.
Yes, because this has been put. I'm just saying, I'm really.
I know people say this. I know people say this a lot. Yeah. Okay. Oh well, people say, well, resources are actually infinite, and maybe we can go and colonise the universe and all the rest of it. First of all, I mean, the idea that there'd be kind of mass transit to other planets to escape a contaminated Earth seems to me to be really the logical extension, if you like, of the act of faith that says, oh, science and technology will find something tomorrow. The new technological fix will clean up the technological mistakes of yesterday. But it may be also, it's equally valid to say that we're living in a system which has already created so many irreversibilities that our freedoms in the future may be strictly limited. For instance, there are many who say that it's possible that the gene pool of humanity has itself been irreversibly damaged by the levels of radiation in the world. Now, if so, this is already awesome, that the idea that the technological fix is going to cure what the technological fixes of the past have created seems to me to be a pitifully circular argument, one that is it's both banal and I really can't find words strong enough to say how ridiculous it is, really. That it implies people in the grip of faith that really is not going to be shifted, disconfirmed by mere evidence.
Okay, great. Now, one last one.
Yeah.
I don't know what your own personal opinion would be on this, but
on.
when we spoke to David Fitzpatrick, he was saying, for instance, about it. He was talking about the Greens would advocate if a new technological device came, they would consider, is there a need for this device? And that would say whether it was permitted to be sold. I mean, for instance, if somebody brings out a new technological device, which people are quite happy to buy and use, and the green government or whatever doesn't like it, would you sort of use coercion to prevent these people from, producing such technological devices and people from buying and using them?
Yeah, I think one of the problems is that with the green vision beneath the kind of, I think beneath the mistaken image, if you like, of kind of gentility and niceness, there lies a profoundly, possibly a profoundly illiberal and coercive possibility. It's very difficult to say. I mean, it's like all of those arguments that were argued around socialism, about legislation for people's own good, do re-emerge and will re-emerge around the green movement as it becomes stronger. And I think it's one that really has yet to be. I mean, as a libertarian green, this is going to pose enormous problems in terms of persuasion and converting people to another way of thinking. I mean, I prefer to see it as a kind of liberation struggle, in the sense that I think we need